Hello, in this video, I will derive using power rule and explain power rule. So what is power rule? Power rule is just another technique for finding derivative. It's a much faster technique than using the definition of derivative. Um, Usually you can apply power rule when a term has a constant times a letter raised to a certain power. For example, y equals 3x squared. Um, so that's when you know you would use power rule. So what is the power rule? It is this uh it's d over dx. It's just this, and it's actually simpler than it looks. Uh so it's just uh the power times the constant, and then the letter stays the same, and then the new power is going to be the old power minus one. That's all it means. So let's do a few examples. Okay, next one. Okay, so let's start with example one. It says find the derivative using power rules. So yeah, do not use definition of derivative. That's okay. So what you're gonna do, it's gonna be y prime, and then so it's the coefficient times the power. So this doesn't, you don't see a coefficient, but it does have an invisible one. So it's just one times the power. So one times six is six. The letter stays the same. And then the new power is going to be the old power minus one. So it's going to be y prime equals to 6x, and then 6 minus 1 is 5. And that is pretty much it. Not too bad, right? Let's move on to example 2. So find the derivative using power rules. So later on, you'll learn that if you have a fraction, you can use the quotient rule. But I don't like using the quotient rule because it is a lot of work. So I'm going to apply the power rule. So how would I apply the power rule? I'm going to have to rewrite this problem as let's use color blue. I'm going to rewrite this as y equals as a negative power. So how do I write 1 over x to the 7th as a negative power? It would be x to the negative 7. Okay, and then just apply the power rule. So it's going to be the coefficient times the power. So this does have a coefficient of 1. So 1 times negative 7 is negative 7 x. And then the new power is going to be the old minus 1. So you get y prime equals to negative 7x to the negative 8. Now you can stop here, or you can write it as a positive power, right? So you can also write this as a positive power. It would be negative 7, and then x to the negative 8 would be 1 over x to the 8. So it would be x to the 8. So either answer works. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now as you can see, you have 3 terms. That's okay. What you would do is just take the derivative of each term, applying power rules. So it's going to be f prime of t. So start with the first term. What's the derivative of negative 2t squared? It's going to be negative 2 times the power, which is negative 4. And then the new power is going to be 2 minus 1, or really 1. Plus, and then the derivative of 3t is going to be this does have power 1. It's 3 times 1, which is 3 t, and then it's just going to be the old power minus 1. And the derivative of a constant is 0. And the reason why the derivative of -6 is 0 is because it does have a power. It's like -6x to the 0, right? And then if you apply the power rule, 0 times -6 is 0. And then the new power is 0 minus 1, just -1, but anything times 0 is 0. So really, you just have to remember that the derivative of 3t is just going to be 3. Okay, so when you clean it up, f prime of t is going to be -4t, and then the new 2 minus 1 is 1. And then if you simplify 3t, 1 minus 1, well, we know that 1 minus 1 is 0, right? So 3 to the 0. And then anything raised to the 0 is 1. So 1 times 3 is 3. So it's just 3. And that's it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, the derivative of this. So okay, so it's going to be y prime. The derivative of 16, it doesn't have a letter, so constant, it's going to be 0. The derivative of -3x is going to be -3. So this has a power 1. So 1 times -3 is still -3, and then the letter, and then the new power is going to be the old minus 1. So the old power is 1 minus 1. And then the derivative of -1/2 x squared. So you're going to multiply the power by the constant. So what is -1/2 times +2? -1. And then the power is going to be the old minus 1. So when you put it all together, this is going to be 0. You don't have to put the 0. And then -3x to the 1 minus 1, well, we know that that's x to the 0, and then anything raised to the 0 is 1. So 1 times -3 is -3. And then this is going to be -1x, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay, so that is your final answer. Okay, let's do example 5. So this is the 4th root of x. So it looks confusing. You would probably think, how do I apply the power rule? Well, what I would do is write it as an exponent. So how do I write the 4th root of x as an exponent? It's really the same thing as x to the 1/4. Then you could just apply the power rule, right? So this has a coefficient of 1. So the coefficient times the power, which is 1 times 1/4 is 1/4 x. And then you might have to do some algebra here. So it's the old power minus 1. So the old power is 1/4 minus 1. Or in our case, since we're subtracting fraction, 1 can be expressed as 4/4, right? So 1 minus 4 is -3, and then 4. So you can read it, you could simplify this. Some teachers prefer it to be completely simplified. So if you want to completely simplify it, let's write it as a positive power. So it would be 1/4, and then x to the -3/4 it would be expressed as a positive power 1 over x to the +3/4. And that is going to be 1 over 4x to the 3/4. And if you really want to simplify using radicals, this would be simplified as 1 over 4, and then x to 3/4 is the same thing as the fourth root of x cubed. Okay, so if you want to simplify like this, you can leave it like this, or if you want to use a negative power, that's fine. Okay, let's move on. This one. Now, later on, you're going to learn about quotient rule. If you can avoid quotient rule, you should, because it does take more time. I don't want to apply the quotient rule. I want to use power rule. So I'm going to have to rewrite this equation as a negative power, right? So 2 over 3x squared can be written as 2/3 x to the negative 2. Or it can also be like in between, like 2/3. Like the x could be right in the middle. That's perfectly fine. So how do you take the derivative applying power rule? So you just do the coefficient times the power. So what's 2/3 times negative 2? Negative 4/3. And then it's going to be the letter, which is x. And then the new power is going to be old power minus 1. So that's negative 4/3 x. And then on the negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Now, if you want to use a positive power, that's fine. It would be negative 4/3. And then x to the negative 3 can be expressed as 1 over x to the positive 3. So when you clean that up, that's going to be negative 4/3x cubed. Okay, and that's it. Okay, this one looks confusing. How can you apply the power rule? Just write it as a power, everything as an exponent. So f of x. So how do I write the square root of x as a power? Remember, this doesn't have a number here, so there is an invisible 2, so that can be expressed as x to the 1/2. And then how do I write negative 6 cube root of x as a power? That could be expressed as negative 6x, and then the cube root of x could be expressed as 1 over 3. Okay, and then to take the derivative, just apply the power rule for each term. So x to the 1/2 could be expressed as 1/2 x, and then the new power is going to be the old power minus 1, or in our case, we can write 1 as 2 over 2. So 1 minus 2 is negative 1/2. And then do the same thing with the second term. A negative 6 times, so the derivative of negative 6x to the 1/3 using power rule is you multiply the coefficient negative 6 times 1/3, which is negative 6 over 3, which is negative 2x. And then the new power is going to be the old minus 1, or in our case, 3 over 3. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2 over 3. Okay, if you want to write it as a positive power, that's fine. It would be f prime of x equals to, this as a positive power, it would be 1/2 x to the 1/2. And then this would be negative 2. And then x to the negative 2/3 could be expressed as 1 over x to the 2/3. And then if you really want to clean it up, simplify it, you can write it as a square root. So on the bottom, 2x to the 1/2 can be expressed as 1 over 2, and then x to the 1/2 can be written as square root of x. And then it's going to be minus 2 over, how do I write x to the 2/3 as a radical? That can be expressed as the cube root of x squared. Okay. Yes, so this would be your final answer. Okay, so I think that is let me check. That might be the last example. Yes, so the next one would be the quiz. Okay, we'll stop here. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.